The whole debate around menstrual leave in India, it feels like it's stuck on a loop, right? People either call it a progressive leap for workplace equality, or they say it's a step backward that just reinforces old stigmas. Well, today, we're going to try to break that loop. We're going to reframe this entire conversation. Because what if it's not really about biology at all? What if it's about justice?
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the hidden cost of people working while they're unwell, something called presenteeism. Then, we're going to reframe this whole thing as a basic constitutional right. After that, we'll dive into the biggest practical objection people have and show how to solve it. We'll explore the right way to implement a policy like this with dignity. And finally, we'll zoom out and ask the big question. Who is this justice really for?
So, first up, the price of presenteeism. The big fear you always hear is about what happens when employees are absent. But the sources we're looking at today argue that the real crisis, the much bigger cost, is when people show up to work but are in so much pain they can't actually function at their best.
And that brings us to this key term, presenteeism. It's basically the opposite of absenteeism. It's all about the huge loss in productivity when someone is physically at their desk, but mentally, they're just not there. You know that feeling, right? You're present, but your brain is foggy with pain, and you're really just counting the seconds until you can go home. That's presenteeism.
And get this, the scale of this problem is absolutely staggering. Workplace research shows that the cost of people working while sick is actually 3 times higher than the cost of them just staying home. It's this massive, hidden drain on a company's efficiency that we, for some reason, often mistake for dedication.
And this quote just nails it. We've been measuring the wrong thing all along. Think about it. An employee who takes a day to recover comes back refreshed and productive. But someone who's forced to work through severe pain, they're going to produce lower quality work and are way more likely to burn out. The real inefficiency is forcing people to be present when they shouldn't be.
And look, this goes way beyond just office productivity. The stigma and the total lack of support around menstruation have these huge ripple effects across society. It impacts education, public health, and gender equality. So creating supportive workplaces is actually a critical piece of a much larger puzzle. It helps normalize menstrual health as a basic right, which ties directly into India's bigger development goals.
Okay, so that brings us to our crucial reframe. The conversation really shouldn't be about accommodating a biological process. It needs to be about upholding a fundamental principle of justice in the workplace. And this isn't just some nice-to-have company policy we're talking about. It's rooted right here in the Indian Constitution. Article 42 specifically calls for just and humane conditions of work. So, providing leave for a completely predictable health event isn't a special favor. It's the bare minimum. It's the constitutional baseline.
When you look at it this way, menstrual leave isn't some crazy radical new idea. We've already normalized taking time off for all sorts of things: sick leave, medical leave, even stress or mental health leave. This is just about recognizing another perfectly legitimate health condition that sometimes requires a person to rest and recover.
Okay, but what about the logistics? I know what you're thinking. Let's tackle the biggest operational concern that critics always bring up and show how what they see as a fatal flaw is actually just a design challenge that we can absolutely solve.
This is the question you hear every single time. It's the ultimate what-if scenario that people use to shut down the whole conversation. What if everyone takes it at once? But let's actually break down why this entire premise is based on a huge misunderstanding of both biology and how these policies actually work.
See, this whole collapse scenario is built on 3 really shaky assumptions. First, that everyone's cycle is perfectly synchronized, which is just statistically impossible. Second, that everyone experiences debilitating pain every single month, which just isn't true. And third, that this is a mandatory leave policy. It's not. It permits leave for those who actually need it. It doesn't force it on anyone.
And in fact, there's already a proven model for handling this stuff in industries that can't afford to shut down, like airlines and hospitals. They use a 4-layer system. First, rolling quotas to manage any overlap. Second, simple team coordination, like a shared calendar, so colleagues know what's up without a manager needing to approve anything. Third, you cross-train people for backup. And finally, you use technology so requests can be made privately and discreetly. It's a system designed for resilience, not collapse.
So once we agree that it is logistically possible, the next really important question is how you do it right. This next part is all about making sure the policy actually empowers people instead of controlling them. Because a policy like this can go down 2 very different roads.
On the left, you have a path built on autonomy and trust. You feel unwell, you take the leave, no questions asked. Simple. On the right, you have a path built on surveillance, demanding doctor's notes, manager approvals, maybe even period tracking apps. It turns a health accommodation into this deeply uncomfortable, patriarchal intrusion.
And the sources on this are crystal clear. For this policy to be genuinely about health and dignity, it has to be self-certified. No doctor's notes, no invasive questions from your manager. Trust is not an optional extra here, it's the entire foundation. If a company assumes its employees are just going to abuse the policy, then frankly, the problem isn't the policy, it's the company culture.
But even if we design the perfect, workable, dignified policy, a massive challenge is still there. Who actually gets to benefit from it? And this is where the conversation has to get much, much bigger.
I mean, just look at this chart. It is staggering. 88% of India's workforce is in the informal sector. We're talking about agricultural laborers, domestic workers, garment factory employees. Any policy that only helps the 12% in the formal sector risks becoming what the source material calls elite feminism, a solution that helps a small, privileged group while leaving the vast majority of vulnerable workers completely behind.
And what makes this so urgent is just how messy the legal landscape is. Bihar has actually had a policy since 1992. But more recent moves in states like Karnataka have been happening at the same time as national attempts have failed. This patchwork of different rules just creates confusion and inequality, which is why the Supreme Court itself is now calling for one uniform national policy.
And a blueprint for what that national policy should look like already exists. It has to cover everyone, formal and informal sectors. It has to be self-certified and fully paid. It needs to have strong anti-discrimination clauses so it doesn't lead to hiring bias, and it must guarantee total privacy, no manager disclosure, period. And this is so crucial. The Supreme Court has completely elevated this conversation. By linking menstrual hygiene to the right to life under Article 21, it's no longer just a workplace perk. It's being framed as a fundamental human right, something that is absolutely essential for a life with dignity.
This quote really gets to the heart of the whole philosophical argument, doesn't it? Real equality isn't about pretending we're all exactly the same. It's about building systems that acknowledge our different needs and accommodate them, so that everyone actually has a fair shot at thriving.
And this brings us to a really powerful moral challenge from the source material. It just flips the whole script. It basically says we should stop asking if employees are dedicated enough for the workplace, and maybe start asking if our workplaces are humane enough for their people.
So we'll end with this question, because this whole debate, it's not really about a day or two off a month. It's about what kind of work culture India wants to build for the future. Will it be one that values seeing a body in a chair, no matter the cost? Or will it be one that understands that true productivity, true dedication can only be built on a foundation of dignity, health, and trust?